10 years ago, it seemed like the rain would never stop. Mountain towns became islands, cut off from the outside world. A widespread flood disaster like Colorado had never seen. Then, the race to reconnect the state, to rebuild in the record time promised by the governor.
I wake up and he's on Channel 9 News saying, we're going to have this open in 60 days before Thanksgiving, and my jaw hit the floor.
The governor now and the governor then sit down to talk about how Colorado is preparing for the next historic natural disaster and what's driving these events. And we'll remember the Coloradans lost, how a teacher's legacy still impacts his neighbors.
He had energy and he was so good to the people in his community.
From the foothills of Boulder County, a decade after the floods of 2013, this is a special edition of Next.
Welcome to Jamestown. A decade ago today, everyone there was told to get out. Kyle will be there in just a minute. It had been raining for days. The creeks were over their banks and still rising, but there was no way out in Jamestown. Roads were washed out up and down the canyon there. 90% of the people in that small town were evacuated by helicopter. We will take a live look from the skies in just a little bit here. The flood literally reshaped Colorado, 500 miles of roads damaged. This is where we would look at one of the 50 bridges that was rebuilt there. Creeks and rivers cut new paths, and Colorado built enormous new infrastructure to hold them within their banks. On September 11th, days of rain became more intense. Flash flooding started in the foothills. The next day, floodwaters topped the banks of Boulder Creek. Creek's worst flooding in 75 years. The Colorado National Guard was doing rescues in the foothills. Former Boulder Sheriff Joe Pelly says the situation got worse as the night went on.
What occurred overnight through that night was one piece of bad news after another all night long. You know, the St. Vrain washed out, left hand washed out, the North St. Vrain washes out, Boulder Canyon washes out. Pretty soon, there was no way to reach the western half of our county. Every single road was lost.
The rain started to let up on the 13th. By then, Jamestown, Lyons, and Estes Park were completely cut off. By the end of the weekend, more than 1,900 square miles were flooded across 18 counties. 9 Coloradans died. More than 19,000 people were forced to leave their homes. 2,000 homes were destroyed, 26,000 damaged. The recovery effort took years and $4 billion. Roads alone cost $750 million. Our Marshall Zellinger is in Lyons to explain why CDOT hopes that money won't literally go down the drain in the next mega flood.
When it's this peaceful, why would you want to rush? Sometimes it's okay to be last. Last year, Highway 7 was the last highway rebuilt from the floods 10 years ago.
And because we had a fixed amount from the federal government to recover, we wanted to make sure that we could deliver all of the other projects.
Purposefully put off, the highway was guilty of having good emergency repairs, the fewest vehicles, and alternate routes to Allens Park and Estes Park.
Now, were they easy routes? No, but it was, like I said, the lowest volume of traffic.
Traffic is why US 34 between Greeley and Kersey was one of the first roads rebuilt.
This bridge never existed prior to the 2013 event.
Before the 2013 floods, this bridge was a road on top of an embankment that got washed away. And instead of rebuilding the same road for less, CDOT asked for more money from the federal government to build a bridge over dry land.
And while it was under construction, in 2015, we had another similar event, and we've got pictures that show there was water up to the bottom of the girder. So it really served its purpose.
We can't keep throwing money at disasters, right? The federal government eventually is going to say, hey, whoa. Why didn't you take care of that road when you went in and repaired it before?
Johnny Olson was the CDOT regional director for this part of the state in 2013.
Yeah, I'd say about 75 to 80% of the damages were in Region 4.
So imagine his surprise when he found out on live TV what then Governor John Hickenlooper expected of him and CDOT.
The next morning I wake up and he's on Channel 9 News saying, we're going to have this open in 60 days before Thanksgiving, and my jaw hit the floor, and I'm like, so I call in that morning and I'm like, What does open mean?
For Olson, that meant one non-paved lane to give access to first responders and allow residents to be able to get food. Then 2 gravel lanes, and ultimately paved lanes.
Your jaw hit the ground, but what was the first thing that came out of your mouth?
And then it was like, yes, sir. We were fully open before Thanksgiving. I've been part of transportation for 32 years, and I've been part of good teams, but that was the most amazing thing, is to watch people work together.
Our Marshall Zellinger reporting. We're having some trouble with our remote connections out in Jamestown right now. We'll get back to Kyle there in just a bit. So our next conversation tonight is with 2 men who would have rightfully received blame in the recovery and rebuilding process if it didn't go well. Then Governor and now Senator John Hickenlooper, and then Congressman, now Governor Jared Polis. We sat down to talk this week about that disaster and when it struck, and how Colorado is preparing for the next biblical flood or mega fire.
We had droughts and wildfires, and that first rain on Monday it rained a little bit, Tuesday it rained a little more, Wednesday it started raining. We were all so happy. And then the next thing you know, there's the worst flooding, the worst nightmare we could ever imagine.
Our helicopter actually landed and picked up some survivors that were screaming for help. Basically, the highways had washed out, the roads had washed out. These people had been there, I think, at that point for about 3 days.
Senator Hickenlooper, when you look at the recovery and the rebuilding effort, is there something that you think that we did particularly well in this instance?
Governor Shumlin from Vermont had called me 2 days after the flood and just said, we had the same thing 3 years ago, and the one thing, you can't go back and tell people you're going to build back what they had. You got to tell them you're going to build it back, but it's got to be better, or else they've lost too much. And so we built back better long before Joe Biden ever said it.
What's on the wish list to make this a more resilient state when it comes to fires and floods?
And let's take a breath and say, look, we're Colorado strong, we're back, we're here. Now you ask a good question. What do we do going forward? First of all, thoughtful about where we build and how we build, right? Looking at the wildland-urban interface. In our state, floods are a risk, fires are an even bigger risk. And so we want to make sure we're thoughtful about building defense perimeters around areas where people live. There's insurance reforms that are happening, some of that because of the Marshall Fire, some of that because of the floods here in Lyons in northern Colorado, to be more friendly to homeowners that have been damaged or lost everything they have. So I think we've taken that learning very seriously. Some of it's translated into action that's already reached my desk, and there's more work ahead.
When that conversation continues in just a moment, we'll talk about how unity can turn to distrust, and when we discuss the role that climate change is playing in making these disasters more frequent and more intense.
It really is hard to believe that it's been a decade, and the weather pattern that set up truly was the perfect storm. We had a cutoff low anchored across the Great Basin. When it's cut off from the jet stream, that means it has a mind of its own. It sat there persistently day after day. Plus, we had a stalled out cold front that draped across the Front Range. That allowed cooler air to push in, and also the upslope flow that allowed all of this moisture coming in from the Pacific and the Gulf to get wrung out. And again, we saw the heavy rains continuing throughout days and days and days, anywhere between about 8 to 20 inches, stacking up. Just wild to see. And tonight, wow, what a picturesque vantage point looking across Boulder and the Flatirons with the blue skies behind. It was slightly below average today, but I mean, picture perfect in my book. 70s across the metro area, 70s, low 80s for the eastern plains. It was comfortable up into the high country too. And tonight I am tracking a few showers out there, though primarily south, however, of I-70, and they should be moving out within the next couple of hours. As we look at the futurecast, here we are at 11 p.m. with mostly clear skies tonight across the metro area, the Front Range. Tomorrow morning you'll wake up to clouds out to the west, a mix of sun and clouds here in the Denver area, but those showers and thunderstorms, they once again will push in from the west this time. This time about tomorrow, 4 or 5 o'clock, we'll be tracking some widespread showers and storms up into the high country, maybe 1 or 2 sneaking down here to the plains, but I would not imagine too much tomorrow. A stronger system will be rolling into Colorado as we look ahead toward Thursday afternoon through Friday. Tomorrow, enjoy highs back to the upper 70s. A couple more clouds out there in the afternoon, but upper 70s, low 80s, pretty much the name of the game. A little cooler up into the high country, and then that next system rolls in Thursday. Thursday night into Friday, cold front sneaks in. That only drops us down to the upper 60s, but we will be looking at widespread rain, half-inch, an inch possible here around parts of the city, and then it clears out, highs back into the 80s for the Broncos game on Sunday afternoon.
There's more and more of these climate-related issues, whether it's going to be another flood or another bad fire year.
If this state is going to see once-in-a-lifetime disasters every few years, we need to have a more honest conversation about what's making them worse. 9 Coloradans were lost in the floods, including a teacher, father, husband from Lyons, whose legacy lives on a decade later.
As the sun sets here in Jamestown, it's a reminder that 10 years ago, in September of 2013, it was at nighttime when the devastating floods did so much of their damage. The heavy rains and flash flooding that began here in Jamestown, up north of Boulder, above Fort Collins, then headed downhill, headed into Larimer County, headed out into Weld County. Evans was particularly hard hit there. So much water in Evans that it cut off a number of the roads in that town, along with roads around Greeley. The water plant in Evans was taken offline by the flooding, and it took months for it to get back fully online. Colorado has a certain unwanted expertise with a particular type of cooperation, because floods and fires have a way of forcing people to work together, because those natural disasters don't respect county lines or city limits. Coloradans who might not think that they have a whole lot in common are suddenly forced to work together quickly to save lives and to rebuild their communities. Of course, water is not the only thing that rolls downhill in a crisis, so often it's not the elected officials or community leaders who are on the front lines, but it's everyday Coloradans who are working literally hand in hand in those early hours, days, weeks, and months. Fires, too, can literally cross a divide. We watched the East Troublesome fire in 2020 burn around the Grand Lake area, then run up and over the Continental Divide and come down to threaten Estes Park. Floods and fires are horrible unifiers that Colorado knows all too well. Perhaps they might even convince us to begin a more robust conversation around the climate change that is driving them to be more frequent and more deadly threats to the people and the places that we love. So that brings us back to our conversation with Governor Polis and Senator Hickenlooper. 10 years ago today, they were Governor Hickenlooper and Congressman Polis. It was the costliest flood our state has ever seen. And in their time in office, we also saw several of the most costly fires that Colorado has ever seen. Scientists will tell you that is not chance. That is the impact of climate change.
I think you just have to focus on the science, you know, the chances of this all being a coincidence with the largest fires, the biggest floods all over a few years. We've had drought for 9 of the last 10 years. You know, I think when you get to the solutions, there can be a vibrant political debate, and that's totally fine. But when you're talking about keeping people safe and make sure we're building in a sensible way, fire defense perimeters, a sensible way against floods, these are just simple facts. They're hard to argue. I think we need to focus on those real proactive solutions around how we can better prepare for the future.
How do we make the connection between worsening fires, worsening floods, the impact of climate on our day-to-day lives?
I don't think it's that big a question anymore. I don't think there are more than a dozen people in the Senate who disagree that climate change is causing these extreme weather events. And there is disagreement, as Governor Polis said. There's disagreement about what the solutions are, what should our priority be, where do we spend the money. But everybody, pretty much everybody, recognizes the science. So people recognize it's real. And they might argue about how much of it's human caused or how much of it, you know, we should use to, you know, electric vehicles. Those are political discussions that we should have, and we need to bring everyone together. But we can't turn away from discussing that what used to be a 500-year flood might be happening every 20 years now.
My full conversation with Polis and Hickenlooper is up on the next YouTube channel. We're back to Jamestown in just a moment. 9 Coloradans died in the 2013 floods. Here in Jamestown, there was Joey Howlett. He was kind of the town matriarch. His house on Main Street was hit by a mudslide. In Lyons, they lost a beloved retired teacher and father, a man named Jerry Bolin. His family told our Steve Sager how over the last 10 years, they have tried to turn their grief into gratitude.
It's
rebuilt. It's beautiful. It's just how Lyons has bounced back.
Perspective helps find beauty in tragedy.
Being able to just look at the river that so many people enjoy and love.
St. Vrain Creek now peacefully winds through Bone Park, the same park this creek destroyed 10 years ago.
It's a symbol of the resiliency of the community.
It's where Holly Stetson
It's really healthy. I'm so glad.
and Amy Ho come to reflect.
I love this park because they planted a tree at the 5-year anniversary of the flood in honor of my dad.
To remember their dad, Jerry Boland.
He was very vivacious. He had energy and he was so good to the people in his community.
A father, grandfather, a Lyons Elementary School teacher of 30 years, and a helper.
He pitched in anywhere that people needed help before they asked.
He was helping that night in September of 2013.
I believe that he went to the shelter at the elementary school, helped people get in and get settled.
About 2:30 in the morning, the fire department came by with the foghorn that said evacuate immediately.
Sharon Boland says it's the last time she saw her husband.
We would have been married 64 years the 2nd of August.
The two took separate cars to flee their home in St. Vrain Canyon. Jerry went to the elementary school, but Sharon wasn't there.
And the wires on my car got wet, and I was just sitting there. It wouldn't move. And he went back home, I guess, to look for me.
Jerry didn't make it out alive. Rescuers found his body days later, downstream from the family home.
I couldn't believe that he'd tried to go back. I didn't think anybody'd love me that much.
10 years have done little to ease the pain of loss.
Every night I dream about him.
And it was just so traumatic, just searching for a body and waiting for every phone call. That changes you.
Yet in the last decade,
Yeah.
this family turned that change into a choice.
Moving from grief to gratitude is so important.
Grief to gratitude.
School meant so much to him.
Education was Jerry Boland's life, the first of his family to go to college because of the GI Bill. Grateful for that gift, he gave it back with decades in the classroom. His family wanted to honor that legacy with a scholarship in his name.
Each year, there's someone that can go to school with the help of that money from him. And each year I can talk about him. It's just a couple minutes, but I can tell people who he was.
Jerry Boland's story lives on.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it's been 10 years, actually.
In people like Jenna Fisher.
The next day, we couldn't go to school. The streets were flooded, and my friends had to leave their homes. And so it was really sudden.
Her junior class had to move to another building the year Lyons High School flooded. A year later, she was among the first to get that scholarship in Jerry's name.
And I helped volunteer in the community. And even to this day, I go back and help out at Lyons. I helped coach the cross-country team last fall and helped out with track in the spring last year. And
now she's in a successful career with a degree in computer science, all while volunteering to teach young girls how to code. Thanks in part to that support she got from Jerry's family all those years ago.
They took something that's so devastating and turned it into a really beautiful thing.
Tragedy to beauty.
I feel like he watches over these kids. He wants to know what they're doing.
Jerry Boland's legacy still alive in the place he loved most.
He believed in this community. He believed in young people and the power and the futures that they could have. And I think that that's a big piece of what he would have wanted.
In Lyons, Steve Stager, 9 News.
We're back to Jamestown next. A sign of how Jamestown does common sense problem solving. This is in the town park. A message from the Committee on Sane Canyon Driving. If the driver behind you is driving faster than you, pull over. Then we all drive the speed we want or need to. See you next time.